Hey everyone, good morning. I'm gonna just pop right out here and say I don't actually know if I have any editing to do with you this morning. So we're just gonna kind of weirdly together see what this is, and we can kind of go from there today. Let's see.
Thank you, as always, for listening to Grey's Matter podcast. Please like, comment, and subscribe to stay up to date on all the latest episodes.
Yeah. Although, I'll be totally honest, I don't remember ever seeing that before. So now that I know what it is, I'm going to rename it so that I can put it at the end of future episodes. Am I going to do that? Huh. Well, let's see. There we go. That's what I was looking for. Well, so I don't know if you remember from a few weeks back that I had started to, I was diving into editing an episode of Grace Matter podcast. And, sorry, just going to move my microphone to this camera to the side here for a quick second. And one of the guests did not upload their data file as an MP3. So I think what I'm going to do here I'm going to see if I can't convert an Audition file over to that MP3. So let's just, boom, we're just going to do it real quick. Google search. This isn't something I've ever had to do before. Audacity to MP3. Okay, so here we are. Just going to open up the file. Oh, that's right. That was part of the problem, wasn't it? All right. Wow. That idea is a total non-starter. So I think what I'm going to do instead because there is certainly some editing work that he's doing, but it's not on Grace Matter podcast. So we are instead, you're going to get a little behind the scenes look at what the finance instead as. Honestly, I'm not up at 5 a.m. for nothing. And it's a bit of an odd day today, so I feel like I'm going to kind of wreck my flow if I just go back to bed. So there we go. All right. So now that I co-host with the finance, my regular co-host and my regular co-host is out for some family things. So I've been joined by guests for the I will be joined, I should say, by guests for the next few weeks, which I'm pretty excited about. So, yeah, let's just. And these episodes are a lot shorter than Grey's Matter podcast episodes. So, there's that as well. We're just going to get rolling here. You're not like, okay, we're scheduled to start because we've announced the live thing. Actually, you know what? I always forget to do this. Let's just match the loudness right now. Boop, boop. And while that's happening, I don't know if you knew this, but What the Finance does have a Patreon. So I'll just take a minute and plug that because we sure would appreciate your support. Or, you know, if you just wanted to if you just wanted to listen to the show and subscribe, that would be awesome too. Anyway, so hello everyone. Welcome to another episode. All right. Oh. And we're just into it. So hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of What the Finance. You know what? I do not. Maybe it's just because it's my own voice. I don't love that so at the beginning. So let's see. So hello everyone. All right. Well, at least it's a clean break, right? Like I appreciate that. So here we go. Hello everyone. Actually, maybe even like a little fade. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of What the Finance. I am joined for this episode by Nick from Showboys. Nick is a really active member in our Discord server and also co-hosts his own podcast called Showboys, where they talk about like popular culture. I think it's fair to say. They talk about it's like popular culture. I think it's fair to say. Is that I don't know. Nick, is that a good
that's
like
pretty
sound
close
bite for Showboys?
Yeah, I think we like to defer to nerd culture really to kind of like sum it all up because you know
let's see, we're just doing a little bit of kind of like silencing along the way here.
Yeah, I think we like to defer to nerd culture really to kind of like sum it all up because it's very show media oriented. It's very because because it's very show media oriented but we really touch on like everything in between too, whether it's like collectibles, game, like it's just everything in the nerd culture thing. So really I think that's where we've settled in the past like year for sure.
That's fair. And maybe this just speaks to kind of where I'm at culturally. I always think of nerd culture as popular culture because it is my popular culture.
Yeah.
But, you know, if you ever try to talk to most people,
yeah.
But, you know, if you ever try to talk to most people about, right, like Star Wars or I was about to say Assassin's Creed, but I feel like that's one of right, like Star Wars or I was about to say Assassin's Creed, but I feel like that's one of the more mainstream things that you guys talk about, right? But like a lot of people are like, what? what are you talking about?
Yeah, and I've
You
always
know.
found the podcast and just being very forward with these hobbies, as I would describe them.
So I kind of forgotten that Nick and I had this full on nerd culture conversation. So like we're not doing Grey's Matter podcast this morning, but we're still getting your little
the
Saturday
podcast and
morning
just being very
of nerd
forward with
things.
these hobbies, as I would describe them. Really kind of let's these hobbies figure out who out there is all like closet nerds as well. They don't really they don't own it up right away. You know, is also maybe like closet nerds as well. They don't own it up right away, but like today was a good example. We had a new person start at my work, and I had a one-on-one with her just to introduce myself and I had a one-on-one with her just to introduce myself and get to know her. But through discussion, introduce myself and get to know her. But through discussions of just like what our interests are, and she's like, "Oh, so you're a nerd." I'm like, "That is correct. Like that's basically the sum of it." And then she, divulged that she for the past, and then she.
Right.
That's basically the sum of it. And then she divulged that she, for the past many years, her and her friends have been doing like an ongoing D&D campaign. So
awesome.
I always just enjoy kind of weeding that out of people like really early on. I want to get to know them. And that all really kind of starts with being very forward with like, yep, love Star Wars, love like video games, movies, all that stuff. So it's been a really good experience just to have that very forefront in my happenings.
Yeah. Well, and I think one thing that
in my happenings.
Well, and I think one thing that you and at least that Mike do, right, like really well in this. At least that Mike do. The thing that you and at least that Mike do, right, like really well in the server is this morning. Maybe I did in my own voice. I don't know. Right, like really what server is, right? Like a lot of these nerd spaces are very male dominated. And so, right, like when women come in, they were like, so I really do actually like this, right? Like D&D or Star Trek is kind of my case, but the people are just going to assume that I like it because my boyfriend or my husband likes it. So like you guys do a really good job of being like, no, like, come on guys, like girls and women like these things too. And
yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah.
I think that's a credit. Is like girls and women like these things too. And I think that's a credit to what you guys do with Showboys.
No, we appreciate that.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, we appreciate that. We always like to joke when we borderline like cancellation like topics on the podcast, but we like to think we keep the community otherwise pretty well oriented, even though our live streams, they're there for entertainment. But yeah, we try to keep it tasteful and very open to everyone. Even though we're show boys, we are we're just kind of show people. Maybe that's the updated term.
Maybe you have to get some more women on your team apart from Amy.
Yeah, we've like our wives, they've helped out in different capacities and stuff like that, and it's tough though with everybody's schedule and everyone just being busy. It's hard to find the people that want to commit their spare time, their free time, and just kind of be hobbyist content creators. I think that's the other issue.
Right, 100%. So we're not actually here to talk about nerds. Right, 100%. So we're not actually here to talk about nerd stuff, even though I think we could probably both talk about nerd stuff for a really long time, and have actually. But I also had the guest to be on your show, and we spent like 3 hours, I think. A really long time, and have actually. But I also had the guest to be on your show, and we spent like 3 hours, I think, talking about nerd stuff. We are actually here to talk about retirement and saving for retirement. So of course, I think we both have kind of had our own experience for retirement. Kind of with the topic or whatever. So I don't know, Nick, I don't know if you want to share a little bit what your experience and even before you started working, like people talk to you about saving for retirement as like a kid or a teenager. Quite the breath. Holy moly. Even before you started working, like people talk to you about saving for retirement as like a kid or a teenager, or were you like adulthood? Here it is. I should probably start thinking about this thing.
Yeah, and I always talk about this with my wife, and it just stretches so far back in terms of each person's like understanding of money and understanding of like assets and just what is currency and just all those nerdy topics if you really kind of get down to it. And it always stretches all the way back to like your childhood and how your parents or who raised you just kind of talk to you about those things, if at all.
Right.
And if anything, mostly I think most people's experiences, it comes off as just like passive habits that they just see from observing how their family or surrounding environment uses money and thinks about money. So my family was very, very cash oriented, I would say. They valued cash over all other resources.
Yeah. Sorry, I was trying to pause that for like a second here. There's just a bunch of ums.
Very cash oriented.
Yeah, the thing I thought I would just try to do here real quickly, because I was indeed on an episode of Showboys, and I just wanted to share that with y'all. So yeah, Showboys, like, it is for real. Like, it's just a fun podcast. I really like it a lot.
So my family was very, very cash oriented, I would say. They valued cash over all other over all cash over all other
so go.
say. They value cash over all other resource. So the way I think about it is there is money, right? Resources, I would say. So the way I think about it is there is money, right? That's a resource. There's also time, and then there's effort. So like to me, those are three equal resources, and you can independently trade them out for one another.
Yeah.
So I always took that approach, whereas still to this day, a good portion of my family, they would rather save the money and spend more effort and time, where they could have, in my mind, like you could have just spent money and you would have got time and effort back. So so really early on, it was a lot of like, you earn the money, you have the cash, you buy it. Credit was used very differently. You earn the money, you have the cash, you buy it. Credit was used very differently. Like credit was mostly like put it on the credit card and then you pay it off right away. So very, very fiat driven mindset. And never really kind of a conversation of like, oh, you should start saving now, or, savings, because it was cash oriented. Savings is always a very important part, I guess, of my mentality by default. And I always take that as like in high school, I worked at a grocery store, and whatever minimum wage was back then, I think it was like $6.85 when I started, and then it creeped up to like $7.25. But I was able to save $200 a week. My paychecks would be like $200 to like $250 maybe on a good week. But I would save like all of that outside just paying for gas and like a $5 sub from Subway across the lot.
How exciting it was when your first paycheck was more than $100.
I would save $1,000 a month, more or less, and I would take that physically to the bank, like the cash, and deposit it. So that I kind of saved for college in that sense. I didn't work my first year of college, and that that was kind of like the basis of the idea of like,
man, I have absolutely, you'll hear in a minute, money. But I had no sense of what that would be like.
Starts to form like anyone's understanding of retirement when you start thinking about life beyond like the next 4 years, let alone like the next year. Because in college, I didn't think about life in longer than 1 year stretches of, how long I had planned courses.
Right. And sometimes that's even just a semester at a time, right? You're like, depending on what you signed up for in that term, you're like, I made it another week. Do I withdraw now?
Yeah.
Right. At least that was my experience, but.
Yeah, so it wasn't anything I really started to think about.
I just wanted to make sure that all I got. So that's where we're at. That was my experience.
Yeah, so it wasn't anything I really started to think about until I got my first job. And obviously you start having the benefits be placed in front of you, and you're like, you start to think about that. But, I tell the story of the whole like, cash-oriented, reliant bit that's instilled in me, because like that deterred me from instantly saying I'm going to start a 401k or I'm going to start a retirement savings thing. Because in my mind, it was more like, no, I'll just do it myself. I will save physically my money. And then until I get to a point where I feel like I have enough of this to then start the like maybe like higher class problem of savings to then start the like maybe like higher class problem of having a retirement fund, right? I didn't like mentally picture myself as someone there yet.
Yeah.
So That at the same time, like I just passively read things, and they're really picture myself as someone there yet. That at the same time, like I just passively read things, and they're like, hey, every year in your 20s that you're not starting your retirement account puts you back, an retirement account puts you back, an exponential amount versus starting it into your 30s, 40s, where you get really behind in terms of like typical goals. So it was always to me kind of like a ticking thing toward 30, where it's like I need to start it every year. I don't start it, I'm just setting myself back or just not being as far as I could be. So
Yeah.
And I guess the reason I put that off really until I was like 30 was because I had the cash mindset where it's like I put it off really until I was like 30 was because I had the cash mindset where it's like I'll just save the money and that will make do for now, and I can make up for it later maybe by just like dumping in like savings into my retirement to make up for the lost time. But even then it doesn't equate out once you really start understanding how these things work long term.
Yeah, 100%. Had a very similar experience. So, like, when I'm recording this episode, my really super excellent spouse, I'm just going to do a quick save here, was basically in the other room running interference, right? Because these always get recorded while my kids are in bed. So when you're hearing all those throat clears and whatnot, that's that's what you're hearing there. I'm waiting. I'll just. There we go.
Understanding how these things work long term.
Had a very similar experience, but I think kind of. Had a very similar experience, but I didn't want to silence Nick, just myself. Here we go. Right.
These things work long term.
Had a very similar experience, but I think kind of compounded onto that was I grew up in a home where my mom stayed home with the kids. I grew up in a home where my mom stayed home with the kids, and every other woman that I knew also was a stay-at-home mom, which probably like totally fine. And when you think about the cost of daycare and what, like, this still seems like a pretty attractive choice.
Yes.
Like, oh man, it's been, as a sidebar, it's been kind of a blessing to not have to pay for full-time daycare the last several years as a result of the. But so for me, in addition to nobody being like, "Hey, Rachel, you should probably think about saving for retirement," like there was also nobody who was saying to me really, like, you should probably think about what you want to be when you grow up.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because all the women that I knew stayed home with their kids, and like maybe they had a college degree, but mostly it was so that you had something to think about while you were making it. Yeah, and I actually I did a video about this, just a little one that you can find on my YouTube channel. Kids, and like maybe they had a college degree, but mostly it was so that you had something to think about while you were making endless peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Apart from the fact that you're super bored from making endless peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Right. But then when I went to college, But then when I went to college and I got like my first adult job, and I didn't work full time actually, like all through. From my associate's degree, maybe, and I didn't work full time. From my associate's degree, from my associate's degree, and I didn't work full time actually, like all through. Let's see. I'm just gonna. There. I think that's like spot to cut it. Let's see how that sounds. And I didn't work full time actually, like all through. From my associate's degree, my bachelor's degree, and my master's degree. Just work 40 hours a week through like the whole thing. But
Really?
My parents actually still are paying off their own student loans, so it just work 40 hours a week through like the whole thing.
Really?
My parents actually still are paying off their own student loans, so it wasn't like I could go to my parents and be like, "Hey, I could use your." My parents actually still are paying off their own student loans, so it wasn't like I could go to my parents and be like, "Hey, I could use your help, please." Like, I didn't have the money either. But when I finished my bachelor's degree, kind of like you just talked about, right? Like you get the packet of benefits, and my boss, I think at the time she was. So we'll still do like a little bit of silence, right? Because like as a conversational nugget, right? Like you want to make it clear that the person is thinking, but maybe not quite as long. Boss, I think at the time she was like 40, I was like 40 to 45, like kind of in that age range. And she was like, "So Rachel, what are you gonna do?" Like kind of in that age range. And she was like, "So Rachel, what are you gonna do about retirement?" And I was like, I don't know, right? Like I'm not really sure what I'm gonna. I don't know, right? Like I'm not really sure what I'm gonna do. I don't think I'm gonna sign up just yet. Right? Like I was 24. It felt like a very long way away. And she said, "You might want to think about putting in like 1 or 2% because we do match." She said, "And I'm close enough to retirement, and I didn't save, that now I'm putting in about 50% of my paycheck into retirement." That now I'm putting in about 50% of my paycheck into retirement. And the organization I was working for only matched up, but right, they matched up to like 5% or something like that. So like most of what she was putting in was not being matched. And I went, "Oh. Not being matched." And I went, "Oh. Okay. Well, cool." And so that's what I did. But here we go. Okay. Well, cool. And so that's what I did. But my spouse and I are also very fortunate to both be public employees in the state of Minnesota, which means that part of, so I'm in a labor union. be public employees in the state of Minnesota, which means that part of, well, so I'm in a labor union, my spouse is not, but like for my labor union contract, we are mandated to save for retirement with matching. And so I think that for me, mandated to save for retirement with matching. And so I think that for me has also been just a huge benefit in the sense that it doesn't really matter if I want to or not. It doesn't really matter if I want to or not. I work at a state where state employees are unionized, and we save for retirement. Dang it! So,
right? Yeah,
and like I don't have to think about it, and I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, and that is nice, and that's like with anything with money, like we talk about in the Discord or anywhere. It's such a personalized experience all the time, and everyone's a new like.
A bunch of little like
anywhere
blips along
it's
the line
such
there.
A personalized experience all the time. Everyone's a new like equation when it comes to, like there's like only so many combinations at the end of the day, really, but it's hard to really blanket statement these things, but there are at least some general blanket statements in there. And like one good one is like, well, if you work for a company or organization that matches you on any certain percent, you should at least match them on that percent. There is no reason not to, because it literally adds to your compensation directly, depending on if if they match 5%, you better put 5% in, because you just increased your income by 5%. Even though you lost 5%, it's doubling in there into the account. So exactly. Little things like that. Now, my first job, I didn't, they didn't have good benefits. They certainly didn't match. And that's why I thought it would also just be better not to. I was like, yeah, they don't match. There's no reason to. I will just try to like self-invest and try to save and do it that way. That didn't really work out as like.
Did I do it again? I think I did. Yeah. Okay. There we go. Ooh. Well, I'm apparently just having a bit of a moment here. Holy smokes. Let's try that again. Right.
So exactly. Little things like that. Now, my first job, I didn't, they didn't have good benefits. They certainly didn't match. And that's why I thought it would also just be better not to. I was like, yeah, they don't match. There's no reason to. I will just try to like self-invest and try to save and do it that way. That didn't really work out as like great as it could have. Obviously, just like you have this idea of like, oh, I'm going to save money, but that paycheck gets eaten away 100 different ways. So,
I mean, right, and I think my experience has always been that whoever it is that's coming up, right, like the young adults that are coming up, the older folks. And I feel a little bit uncomfortable that I am now kind of a little bit in that group. Let's see. The older folks, and I feel a little bit uncomfortable that I am now kind of a little bit in that group.
You're older and younger folk at the same time.
I mean, right. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm 34, so I'm like right there in the middle where I'm like, people... Right, like Rachel's a real adult, but also the actual real adults are like, no, you don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
But right, like you're always like, oh, what are these young people spending their money on? They're just throwing it away. But like at the time, right, like I would feel comfortable making spending their money on. They're just throwing it away. But like at the time, I would feel comfortable making a blatant statement that most people who are like fresh out of college and working their first jobs aren't really throwing their money away. Right? Like when I think about the stuff that like I spent money on, where I'd go, oh crap, like what am I gonna do? It was uh, sometimes really stupid things that I learned, right? Like all the fruit in your house goes bad, and like, well, I still need some fruit, so now I'm gonna go and buy more. Or like, if you're like a parent of young kids, you're like, well, um, still need some fruit, so now I'm gonna go and buy more. Or like, if you're like a parent of young kids, you're like, well, shoot, we went through way more diapers than I was expecting, so now we've got to go and like get more diapers. Or like you drove a friend in an emergency, and so now you're spending more on gas than you had budgeted for, right? Like stuff like that.
Yep.
That so you're, to my mind, you're not ever like throwing your money away, but you're totally right. Like those paychecks, they're just gone.
Yeah, and I think that's why I mean, we have to be proactive in how we throw away our paychecks too. Almost like we need to find ways to throw it away before the world finds ways to throw away our paycheck.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And like a good example of that is I taught my wife this, like once it goes into your savings, like don't even acknowledge your savings. Pretend it doesn't even exist. Like if you can somehow block out your mind that the savings like is untouchable, like don't even, like in my mind, I don't take money out of my savings to buy special things. I take that out of my checking.
Oh yeah.
That eats into my general spending budget. So once it's in my savings, it's locked away. Same thing with um,
Oh,
like if you
I hear
allocate
some
that percent of your
children.
check before it even like hits your account to go into a different account,
Mhm.
you never had it in the first place, and you are
Exactly.
chopping up your paycheck before anything else in the world tries to chop up your paycheck, whether it just be as simple as like, oh, I want to go see that new movie that came out. You go to the movies, and all of a sudden you spent $50 there, and somehow you realize walking out, you're like, man, that was a terrible movie, and that was a half a cart of groceries that I could have gotten instead.
Right.
Everything equates to groceries these days. That's the current metric for how expensive everything is. So
I'm I mean, yeah, it's the same on my side too. Right? Sorry about that, 'Cause
everyone.
school lunch is not free anymore, so we are buying way more food than we
Right.
were last school year. And I think also for folks, if you're thinking about right, like the last school year, and I think also for folks, if you're thinking about right, like the implications of like pulling from your retirement fund for some kind of an emergency, like there are, excuse me again, everyone. All right. So we're just going to
Like,
plug
there are
along
also
here for like
tax implications to that as well.
30
Right,
more
so-
seconds.
If you're pulling out of your 401k for any reason before you're 65, right, you're going to get a tax penalty. So you might not feel it right away, but you're definitely going to feel it at tax time. Like 100%. But on the flip side, you're definitely going to feel it at tax time.
All right. So there we go. So I just want to I'm going to stop screen sharing here. 'Cause I just want to give a big thank you to you for joining me this morning. And really every Saturday morning. It means a lot to me. And I hope that you kind of just appreciate getting to see a little bit of behind the scenes, right, of like what this work looks like and how I go about doing it. And maybe more importantly, how I go about doing it when I've got little kids around. So, of course, as always, feel free to reach out on social media, on Facebook. Facebook is social media, via email, what have you, because I would love to hear from you. So, until next week, this is Rachel, and I hope you